Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot.
Is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
Home run. Good.
This is as good as it gets.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. Coming up on this edition of the show, we are going to be hearing from Sickboy's Jeremie Saunders. Josh had an opportunity relatively recently. It's been a little while since we had this conversation, but relatively recently, Josh sat down with Jeremie to talk all things the podcast, plus how cystic fibrosis impacts the world of sports and parasports. So they get into all that in that interview as well. CBC sports reporter and friend of the show, Devin Heroux, received the first ever wheelchair curling leadership award. So we're going to discuss all that, and I'm going to press the panel just a little bit on maybe how Devin could improve. I know I can't believe I'm saying that Devin might need to improve, but we're going to kick that around for a bit later on in the program. Plus, maybe a little bit of mainstream sports. Might have to talk Montreal Canadiens. Might have to talk Mitch Marner. Who knows what we do in the latter part, but stay with us and you'll find out. Here comes your headlines. I'm joined by Claire and Josh.
Neutral Zone headlines.
For over 50 years, Dean McKinnon was a steady and respected presence on basketball courts across British Columbia. Now, his contributions will be recognized with his induction into the Wheelchair Basketball Canada Hall of Fame. McKinnon's officiating career dates back to the early 1970s, when he first joined the Vancouver and District Basketball Officials Association shortly after graduating high school. What began as a practical assignment helping referee girls' high school basketball games quickly evolved into a lifelong passion. Congratulations, Dean, on a great career and a well-deserved honor.
On Sunday, May 31st in Ottawa, you can support the Canadian women's para ice hockey team at a fundraising event at Overflow Brewing Company. Doors open at 4 p.m., and tickets are $60 that include food and entertainment, and music will be by Jim Bryson. For more information and to get your tickets, follow Women's Para Hockey of Canada on all of their social platforms. If you're not able to attend this event in person, you can still purchase tickets or donate to the organization.
Very cool. Congratulations to Toronto Blue Jays veteran pitcher Kevin Gausman for recently reaching and surpassing 2,000 career strikeouts. It's been wonderful watching Kevin over the last number of years since he's been here, and he's really been a steady presence on the mound. I know we're in the last year of his contract. I sincerely hope he signs, even if it's a short-term deal, in 2027 and beyond. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this bowl game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR.
Strike!
Pitch and a strike. Hey, gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. Now that's a winning combination.
We are pleased and excited to be joined today by Jeremie Saunders, who is the host of the world-renowned podcast Sickboy. He is here to talk to us today about his podcast and how his diagnosis of cystic fibrosis may or may not have played a role in playing sports. Jeremie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Joshua. So happy to be here. World-renowned. Wow, I don't hear that very often. That's if that's true, geez, that's cool.
That is very cool. Having been part of it for an episode, it's pretty amazing stuff. So we're looking forward to talking about it. Can we start off, if you don't mind, by just talking to us a little bit about your diagnosis? You do have cystic fibrosis. How does that come to be? Have you kind of always had it, born with it?
Yeah, it's like the makeup commercial back in the early 2000s. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Well, for sure I was born with it, and for sure it's not Maybelline. Cystic fibrosis, it's a genetic disease. So basically, mom and dad both had a copy of this genetic mutation. They had single copies, which means they don't have cystic fibrosis. And to be frank, most people who are walking around in the world with a single copy probably don't even know that they have this single copy of this genetic mutation. And so when mom and dad had a baby, they had a 50-50 shot. And I came out and got the short end of the straw. And this was back in 1988 when I was born. And so in 1988, this was prior to the time where we were screening newborns for cystic fibrosis. So I was born into the world, as far as my mom and dad knew. I was kind of a normal, healthy baby. But as that first year started to go on, I was showing more and more signs that there was something wrong. And for folks who live with cystic fibrosis, CF is mostly known as a lung disease, but really this genetic mutation affects the entire system of the body. So it's not uncommon for people with CF to not only have lung issues, but also have pancreatic issues. And that issue very specifically is that the pancreas fails to produce the required enzymes to break down and absorb nutrients from food. So one of the early signs that I was showing that something was going on is that I wasn't able to keep food down. I was losing weight. I was constantly crying because I, probably had a really upset tummy. And this was the thing that essentially led to my parents searching for answers. And the way that they discovered that I had CF is actually quite interesting. One of the weird quirks with CF is that this gene mutation causes an issue with the sodium chloride channels in the body. So essentially I have this inability to move chloride or salt in and out of the cells of the body, which cascades into this huge effect of a buildup of mucus throughout the body. But one of the kind of interesting little tidbits is that this also leaves me with really salty skin. So people with CF lose 2 to 5 times more salt in their sweat than your average person. And so the way that my parents figured out I had CF is that my dad had a colleague who had told him about his daughter who had CF. And he was hearing what my dad was saying about me as a baby. And he said, Cobb, my dad's name is Cobb. Mm-hmm. He said, Cobb, I have a daughter with CF. And it sounds like what Jared's dealing with is very similar. And he goes, I'll tell you what, take him home. When you go home today, give him a bath, clean him off really well, and lick the back of his neck after you've dried him off. And if he tastes like a salt lick, I almost guarantee you he's got CF. And so that's exactly what my dad did. He gave me a bath, dried me off, licked the back of my neck, and said, he said, I tasted as salty as a potato chip. And so that was the thing that spurred my dad and my mom to go and get me tested at the children's hospital. And they run what's called a sweat test. That's actually the sort of gold standard for diagnosing CF. And that sweat test came back positive, and that's how we found out. I was 18 months old. So when I was diagnosed, so it's all I've known. It's my entire life has been a life dictated by cystic fibrosis.
That's wow. Don't even know where to go with that, to be honest.
Not often does a diagnosis story come from, my dad licked me.
Well, exactly. And in a very unique area too.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it was diagnosed early, but before the diagnosis became official, I'm sure there were points and signs that I think you were just kind of alluding to there. You've kind of walked us through that, but was there any other sort of signs or things happening that maybe they they were aware of that also pointed them that way?
Yeah, well, like chest infections, this inability to digest food. So I was, my bones, my body was growing, but like I wasn't gaining weight. So like, it sort of just looked like this baby is failing to thrive is essentially what was kind of standing out to them. But of course, once they got the diagnosis, then it all made sense. And they, my parents were at least informed on what to likely expect, which is that, your son has a genetic progressive disease. He's not likely going to live to see his 20th birthday. And the life that he does lead will be a constant battle where he will be consistently fighting off lung infections, which will lead to this scarring of the lungs. And more likely than not, his death will come from this permanent lung damage that will essentially lead to his inability to be able to breathe enough, and his lung function will, kind of tank. And so they were sort of right in that my life did become a constant battle of trying to maintain weight. So gaining weight was really hard with the pancreatic insufficiency.
Yes.
And then the lung infections were kind of constant. So, I was admitted to the hospital on average once a year. Usually it would be like a 2 to 3 week stay where I would be in mostly for lung infections. Okay. But throughout my youth and in my teens, I also was admitted quite a few times for like bowel obstruction. So that pancreatic issue led to a lot of gut issues. And so I'm kind of like a typical textbook CF patient in that it was a balance of those two primary issues. But some people with CF are pancreatic sufficient, so they don't even have the issue where they need to take oral enzymes every time they eat. They, food's fine. They can gain weight. All that stuff's kind of standard, and they more so have the lung stuff. The thing is that there's over 2,000 different genetic variations of cystic fibrosis. So it can look very different from patient to patient.
Sure. Now, obviously, we are a sports show, so we do want to talk a little bit about sports here. Were sports a part of your life, either positively or negatively?
Yeah. So oddly enough, with cystic fibrosis, one of the things that they will tell, young parents who have a newly diagnosed child is that physical activity is going to be your child's best friend. It's going to be the form of alternative therapy that will do more than most of their medications will do. And so that comes from this idea that my lungs are filling with this mucus, this fluid. And unlike something like asthma, where the fear is that exacerbating the lungs will cause a flare up where the lungs will sort of close up and the airways will tighten and restrict. In my case, my airways they're not changing the size. They're just clogged up. Like the plumbing is backed up. And in order to take care of that plumbing issue, you need to physically force it out. So whether that's through physiotherapy, which is like manual cupping of the hands, and you're kind of just like, I used to joke that my parents just lovingly beating the shit out of me my whole life. And so basically they treated me like a drum. Like they're just hand drumming me to try to shake that mucus out, and then I would clear it up. But the other way is through exertion, physical exertion. So I was forced into sports at a very young age, whether I liked it or not, kicking and screaming. I had no say, no choice. And luckily for me, I enjoyed a lot of the sports that I was kind of forced into. But at a younger age, I stumbled into the world of sprint canoe kayak, and I had a knack for it. And I basically, when I was like in junior high, started taking it very seriously and went on to compete. Was on the Canada Games team, and in my mind, it was like Olympics. That's what I'm going to be when I grow up, an Olympic sprint canoeer. And I was the best east of Montreal. I was one of the best in Canada for my age group. And and it was, training 3 times a day plus going to school. Like, it was a very, very intensive lifestyle. Sprint canoe. So I was doing C1, 1,000 meter, 500 meter, 250 meter, and C2 in those same categories. C4. So C1 is 1 single man. C2 is two men. C4 is 4 of us, and then war canoe.
Okay, that must be similar to a dragon boat, I assume.
Yeah, basically a dragon boat, but instead of sitting on your butt, like on a bench, you're on one knee. And so one knee back, you're kneeling down, and then 1 foot ahead of you planted with your front leg bent. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So then that kind of leads into our next question. Given your ability, if you could pick a parasport that you would want to try, what would you choose?
Well, I wouldn't say para canoeing because I would just it would come too easy. I think.
Okay.
It's like I've tried it able-bodied, so no need to try it. No need to try it if I, let's say, lost my leg tomorrow. If I was in that position, I would maybe want to try something new or fresh. I know you do discus and javelin, and there's something. You sent me a photo recently of you throwing a discus, and man, that's gotta feel pretty damn good to just whip something as far as you can throw it. So maybe a track sport. You know what else though? I also have I don't know if this is a parasport or not, but I've just recently gotten really into marksmanship.
Okay.
And so what's the sport where it's the cross country skiing and they
biathlon?
Yeah, but I think if there's para biathlon, I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, there is. Absolutely.
Then para biathlon it is.
There we go. All right. Now, of course, we do have to get into your sort of day-to-day, which is hosting Sickboy. You're a host along with 2 friends, Brian and Taylor. Great guys. I had a chance to be on your show not too long ago. So staying outside of the podcast for now, tell us a bit about your relationship with Brian and Taylor.
Yeah, so they're my 2 best friends. Brian and I actually used to compete against each other in paddling. So when we were kids, we were not friends. We were more frenemies. We knew of each other. We went to separate clubs. We were competitors. He was a year below me, kind of always nipping at my heels, but just never good enough to beat me. And we'll keep it that way.
He's not here, so absolutely.
And if he was here, he would tell you the same. And then Taylor and I met, at this point now, that would have been 2011. So however many years that is. And when I met Taylor, we met in Brazil at a yoga teacher training. We were both learning to become yoga instructors. We met in the jungle in Brazil. And when we met, I had come to find out that he had actually grown up with Brian and they were best friends. And so when we came back to Canada, the 3 of us got together and started hanging out constantly. And that was that was literally the beginning of where Sickboy came to be, because that friendship led to us coming together quite frequently to kind of brainstorm on creative ideas that we could work on, something together. And Sickboy was this notion of a podcast came up in conversation, and we decided, hey, let's rent out this recording studio here at the Halifax Central Library. They had these free recording studios, beautiful, brand new space. And we rented one out. We went in and we had a 1-hour conversation, and that ended up being the very first episode of Sickboy. And it all kind of snowballed from there.
That is very cool. Since we are talking a little bit about how it got started, what can you tell our audience about Sickboy who may not have listened to it yet?
Yeah, so Sickboy is a podcast where the 3 of us, together as hosts, sit down, and more often than not, we are having conversations with guests who have lived experience in the world of living with illness or disability, or people who have gone through, severe trauma or experienced severe grief. And we have a frank, open format, long form conversation around that topic, specifically around our guests' lived experience. And the sort of catch is that it's also a comedy podcast. So as we're talking about this subject matter that is typically very taboo or oftentimes viewed as like a bit of an awkward conversation, we're approaching the conversation with levity. And we're oftentimes, just by the sheer nature of the conversation, trying to mine for and root out the levity that exists within the human experience of being sick. On top of that, as the show, we've been doing it now for a decade. It's been 10 years. And as the show evolved, we started also opening up the door to have conversations with the sort of experts on the other side of the table from the patient. So clinicians, researchers, people who work in the field of healthcare, in order to hear about those jobs, what goes into it, but also to kind of humanize the other side. Because in having a lot of these conversations that we had over the years, a very common theme that we would hear is like the wrongdoings of healthcare providers. The bad experiences that people have as a patient with like a doctor who had just like absolute shit bedside manner. And totally fair, totally like valid, and that happens all the time. But in my personal experience, I've had nothing but like incredible healthcare providers and experiences. And so I also felt like it was really important that we hear from those people as well, so that it's this subconscious reminder that like, hey, there's a whole system that like we are up against as people in society. And within that system that sometimes feels like it's the gatekeeper to our well-being, or it's the cause of a lot of suffering, which is true. But even within that, there are people doing a really incredible job, and they're doing their best. And so we wanted to bridge that gap to, allow those people to also share their voices and their opinions and to hear the difference that they're making in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of juxtaposition between the two, for sure. I've had a chance to listen to a number of episodes now, and a little bit of a spoiler, I am going to be a guest eventually, as we've kind of alluded to. And I was going to say that we all have stories about bad bedside manner, but I guess maybe we don't, and I'm glad you haven't.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like I that's not to say I've never had it, but the majority of my experience has been really positive, right? And I think it's human nature to allow the negative experiences that we have in life to overshadow the positive experiences that we have in life. It's a lot easier to remember the things that sucked than it is to remember all the moments that were glorious. And this is just our way of trying to remind people that, yeah, we all go through hard stuff, but don't forget there's a lot of really good out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you've done this for so many years now, and I know this is probably like asking you to pick a favorite child, but do you have a story or stories that really stick out for you in regards to people you've spoken to? Because, I mean, I can think of a recent one that I listened to that I was on the edge of my seat about, but
yeah, what was it? Do you have a specific example? I'd love to hear.
It was, I don't remember the gentleman's name, unfortunately, but he was the paraglider who fell 11 stories.
CJ. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That paraglider fell 11 stories and is a walking paraplegic, which that in and of itself sounds like a paradox. But wonderful episode, very funny individual. That's a good example. It's great. I mean, there's been a lot. There's been many episodes that stand out as sort of like, core memories. I think one that stands out is we did a live podcast recording for a live show with, there's probably close to 500 people at a bar in Vancouver, and our guest was Dr. Gabor Mate, where we talked about grief and family dynamics and the challenges that exist within that. That was amazing. Another one that stands out is in the earlier days of Sickboy, we recorded with a young man named Brandon who had osteosarcoma. So he had cancer where in his leg, they removed his leg all the way up to the hip. Yep. And he was 19 when we met him and freshly amputated. And he was just this like incredibly hilarious, bright, warm bundle of joy. And we became best friends with him. Nice. And he became a very close part of our day-to-day life. And we had him on the show a number of times. And he eventually died due to his battle with cancer. It's just this repetitive cyclic nature of his cancer kept coming back. He kept fighting it. And eventually it got the better of him. And just having those conversations recorded and having a sort of archive of that friendship is just incredibly meaningful. And so I think that probably stands out as one of the most core, memorable experiences within this last 10 years of the show, for sure.
Now, because you've been doing the show for 10 years, I'm sure there have been different points throughout, but was there one early on where you guys kind of looked at each other and went, I think we've really got something good here?
There were like multiple moments like that. I think when we first put it out, before we even put anything out into the world, before we released any recording, we had maybe recorded 4 episodes. And I made a blog post. This is back in the day when people had blogs.
Right.
And a blog post about the podcast. Mm-hmm. And that blog post got picked up. It went like sort of viral and got national news coverage. We hadn't even put anything out. And all of a sudden we started having people reaching out from across Canada applying to be on the show. And that was a moment where it was like, this is something more than just a few friends like dicking around on a podcast. Like, wow, there's people that actually want to hear this. So that was probably the first moment. I think the second big moment was actually quite recent. Just a couple of years ago, me, Brian, and Taylor we flew to the Governor General's home in Ottawa, and we were awarded the Meritorious Service Medal from the Governor General. And when we got there, it was like, obviously that was like, oh, wow, what an honor. And then we get there and, you're being awarded this with all of the people who were awarded that in that same year. And the other recipients that we were meeting, like, people that have started a program in Syria to give disenfranchised females the opportunity to play recreational sport like basketball, and like a guy who developed some sort of technology to detect and like eliminate radiation coming from like toxic groundwater in indigenous communities up north. And we're looking around going, holy crap, like these people are changing the world. And we're just like 3 friends making dick jokes on a podcast. Like that was a moment where it kind of clicked like, oh, wow, we're like this really is making a difference. And it's probably one of the more proud moments and kind of shocking moments in my life to make the realization whilst we are there to receive the award, the gravity of receiving that award.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, knowing about the podcast and having been a guest, I would say, don't sell yourself short, because what you're doing is you're giving a voice to people who don't necessarily have one.
That's right.
A lot of people who get these terrible diagnoses, they feel like no one else has this. I'm all alone. There's like maybe 10 people in the world that have what I have. And maybe by hearing one of your podcasts, they actually realize, hey, I'm not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And like,
powerful.
like it is. And I think the selling ourselves short is a big part in that. Mm-hmm. Comes from the fact that we're three best friends just having a blast. And so it's like it sort of takes a little bit to shake you out of that, to remind you that, like, yeah, that's very awesome. And just by having fun with your two best friends, you are also, like, truly tangibly making a massive difference in people's lives, which is, like, just such a, I mean, I can't stress enough how friggin' fortunate we are. It's what a gift to have just carved this little life out for ourselves from something that started as just a passion project and has built into what it is today. So it's not lost on me how lucky we are.
I'm sure it's not. And it's something that I enjoy. It's part of my workday. I put it on and I listen to episodes and
now you're a part of it.
And I learn about things I didn't know existed.
That's right.
So it's very, very cool. Now, as part of your episodes, and I don't think you made me answer this question myself, but I have heard you ask it on others. So we're going to turn it around on you. You always ask, what has your disability given and, on the flip side, taken away from?
I didn't ask you that on your episode?
I don't think so.
Crazy. Whoa,
I don't think you did. We talked a lot. I don't know if we had time.
We did talk a lot. So, okay, sorry. So what is it? What has it taken away from me? What have CF taken
What has it given and what has it taken?
Sure, yeah. So I'll start with what it's taken away from me is cystic fibrosis has taken away my ability to... God, it's so funny. I ask this question so much and then I don't have an answer for it.
You do.
And I feel like this answer probably changes daily, but
I think it does for everybody.
Has taken away my ability to... It's taken away my ability to feel confident in knowing what comes next. We didn't really get into it, but the long and short of it is that, I spent my whole life with this notion that I was going to die at 30. That was the life expectancy that I was sort of growing up with. And then all of a sudden I turned 30 and, like, things are okay, but, like, I'm on a pretty steep trajectory. Like, lungs are the lowest they've been, functioning at 50%. So I figured, maybe if I reach 40, that would be wild. I'm 38 right now. But in the last 3 years, there was a new medication that hit the market, and it's a gene modulator. So it's literally correcting the protein that's malformed, which is the cause of, that's the side effect of this genetic mutation. And so now my life expectancy is, like, it's a question mark. I'm probably going to live to be an old man.
Great.
And so no matter how much I thought I knew I had it figured out, no matter how much I thought I know what to expect, yet again, it turns out I really don't. And so what it's given me, I would say, is the exact same thing.
Okay.
Is that it's given me this ability to appreciate having no friggin' clue.
Yeah.
And to just revel in it, as opposed to allow that to be a source of stress. And so it's given me this appreciation for the unknown.
Great. Yeah. That's, I suppose it's a gift as well, in a way, because you've got this life that you didn't expect to have, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jeremie, I really appreciate your time today. I think we'll wrap it up there, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
That was Jeremie Saunders of Sickboy podcast. Again, we had the opportunity to interview him. We had to actually redo that interview from a while ago, so I appreciate Jeremie and Josh putting that all together recently. It's been fun kind of kicking around the Sickboy podcast world in recent months. So I have enjoyed the time with them, and we hope you enjoyed today's interview. with that said, let's chat a little bit about Devin Heroux, who has received the first ever Wheelchair Curling Sports Leadership Award to recognize and celebrate his contribution to the growth and development of wheelchair curling in Canada, especially through his coverage with the Paralympic Games that relatively recently wrapped up. Now, for the beginning of this conversation, you could almost argue that this award could be for his Paralympic coverage as a whole. I know it's blanketed that it's, or it's said that it's for wheelchair curling, and obviously we know that that's where Devin comes from. Easy question to kick it off for you guys. What has Devin meant to the parasport community as a whole? Claire, why don't you go first and then straight over to Josh?
In parasports at any level, and we're talking about the Paralympic level right now, but we need as much exposure and high quality storytelling that we can get, because we just don't find it anywhere else. And people like Devin Heroux not only are people in sport that care about sport and enjoy what they're doing, but they are intentional about telling the stories of para-athletes and that really being the path that they take. And Devin Heroux, his favorite place to be is by a curling sheet. So for him to get this award for curling specifically is probably a huge honor for him. He's probably basking in this and loving it. And he tells stories like no one else, and especially when it comes to Paralympic stories.
Absolutely. I completely agree. The world of parasports needs the light shone on it. And Devin does that in a very meaningful, but also in a caring way, I'll say, because he's not afraid to ask hard questions, but he also understands the humanity behind the story. And he brings that to you so that you end up feeling attached to and compelled to cheer on these athletes that he focuses on, whether it be in rowing or curling or figure skating in the Olympics or just whatever it happens to be. Devin puts 100% into every story he does, and it really shows. It even the times he's been on our program, you feel like you're friends with him, even though you don't know him hardly at all. He just has that way of making you feel important for that period of time. And he shows you how important these athletes are in that period of time.
Yeah, it's remarkable what Devin has done in the parasports community in general. And I've got a little anecdote that I want to bring out here too, and just let you guys know in the audience. I met Devin at the swimming trials not that long ago. It was a couple of years ago. It was they had it in Toronto, and I got to meet Devin, and he literally spent 90 seconds with me. And in that 90 seconds, you just felt like he and you were the only people in the room. Like, no matter what he's talking about or the time that he allocates, he's all there. He's ready to give you everything he's got, all kinds of information. He comes on this program and says, guys, I'm coming on and I found XYZ little nugget that I'm bringing out just for you guys first. Or I'm like, he makes your situation feel like it's the most important at the time. And Claire, I'm going to ask sort of a silly question because I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I feel like he's like that even in a office environment. Like, this is not what we see from Devin in little snippets is what it is. Like, Devin is who Devin is. Am I right, wrong?
You're absolutely right. And I have had the pleasure of sharing an office space with him. And it's anytime you cross paths with him, he's one of the busiest guys in the sports world. So it's rare when you actually get to sit beside him side by side and in a space like that. But yeah, he absolutely makes sure that he's focused directly on you, and it's not surface level questions either. He's truly checking in and asking how you're doing, and I can tell you right now, anytime I've had an interaction with him, he asks about the neutral zone as well. He cares about us as a whole and this show, and that's why he keeps coming back. He's one of our biggest fans, and he's not afraid to talk about that.
I was telling you, Josh, off air recently that my favorite image of Devin that always sticks. We have 3 or 4 little boxes of each other that we see depending on who's with us, and Devin knew for a while we were an audio podcast and would be very theatrical based on that. And then there was this one time where he thought we were audio podcast, and he starts Vanna Whiting his plant beside him, and it's like, see this beautiful thing, and he painted the picture in such a beautiful way, because I had to tell him, well, Devin, we can see the plant, but the audience can. And he was so playfully dejected that, like, oh, this plant is beautiful and it's my friend, and I'm worried about it because I'm going away and who's gonna water it, and things like that. It's just those funny little anecdotes, Josh, that stick out in the mind when we've had Devin the 3 or 4 times we've had it. And for me, the plant one really sticks out.
Absolutely. He's always got a story, or he brings you into the world of wherever he is or whatever he's doing or whoever he's talking to. I remember him telling us about doing, I think it was a commercial with Tyler Turner. And he told us, oh yeah, Tyler and I went to high school together. It's like, I'm sorry, what? Pardon? But that's something you wouldn't know unless you had Devin doing the interview or involved in that situation. And it's just fascinating. He's one of those people that I could sit down in a room with and he could just talk for as long as he wanted, and I'd just listen to all the stories because I know he's got them.
That's exactly it. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine actually this morning who is now in a new role at TSN. And I made a comment that it's people like them and it's people like Devin Heroux that I tune into stuff like the Paralympics. And yes, we tune into stuff like that to watch the athletes and experience the joy of sport. But I know me, and I know there's a handful of people out there that tune in to truly hear and experience people and storytellers like Devin Heroux and like how we experienced Scott Russell as well. We tuned in because there's such great storytellers, and they tell stories from right deep in their soul and their heart. And I love watching people like that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I can't remember what year this was, but there was this whole big thing about Devin finding a 7-Eleven in this particular games. And I feel like it was Tokyo. 2020 or something like that.
It might have been, it's probably Tokyo or China. Yeah.
Tokyo, that's right. One or the other. And he was like, my followers want to know, like, how am I going to survive? I do 7-Eleven. And like, he went on this like 7-minute discussion about finding a 7-Eleven. And I was so captivated by him talking about flipping 7-Eleven, which is so bad for your diet, but so good all at the same time. It's just, he's just so personable. And that's why today's episode, and I've already written it down because I tend to do this whenever I put today's episode in here. I forget what I title it, but I've written it down. I'm doing today as the GOAT, Devin, because he's the GOAT. He is who he is. And yes, Scott Russell could also arguably be the GOAT as well, but that torch has been passed on. And so Devin, there you go. And he's the GOAT. I've always been sort of fascinated this week since I put this together. If you could split hairs, where would you say and why that Devin could improve upon his coverage? And I don't want either of you to say he can't, because there's got to be something somewhere. I'll start with who looks like they're ready. Can somebody give me an indication that they're okay? Claire, thank you. Claire, tell me, where do you feel he can improve on it?
That's a great question. Nobody's perfect, right? If you talk to anyone, especially people in sport, there's always room for growth, right? But people like Devin, yeah, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what that looks like. I would love to see Devin have the opportunity to collaborate and bring on more, for example, covering a curling match. I would love to see Devin also commentating with a retired curling athlete and giving those para athletes, win whatever sport he's covering at the moment, that opportunity to flex their broadcasting muscles and kind of be able to grow from each other in that instance. Because yes, Devin Heroux has done a great job of covering disabled stories as an able-bodied individual. And I think that giving space for more disabled commentators will also give him the opportunity to just learn more, because that's who and how you grow with telling stories of disabled people. You interact directly with them. I would love to see that. I think it's a win-win on both sides. Mm-hmm. I think another point is that Anastasia Bucas is also growing into that conversation of being one of the best broadcasters and commentators, and being able to cover and really deliver para stories. We saw it in Paris. We saw it recently, the 2026 games. I got to work directly with her. She's incredible. The way that she works and the way that she goes about it and how much she cares about it, it's the exact same vibe and feeling that you get from someone like Devin Heroux. I put them in the same category. Absolutely.
That is a very challenging question. And of course, you took my answer away from me, which is there isn't anything. What I will say is that I'm sure Devin is his own worst enemy. He's probably his biggest critic. If we sat him down here and asked him the question, I'm sure he would ream off a page of things that he would like to do better. But I just don't see it. I really don't. I guess the one thing I would say is I'd like to see him able to spend more time at one event or another, because I do sometimes feel like he's a bit of a bumblebee. He's at the pool one day and he's at this the next day, and then he's over here and then he's over there, and then he's taking you on a tour of 7-Elevens in Asia, which are not the same as 7-Elevens in Ontario. And it's just like, whoa, bud, slow down. Like just stay at one event, focus on one event. And yeah. I mean, the other events would suffer if that happened, but it does feel like sometimes he has to leave some stories on the table, because I'm trying to think, there was one day, wasn't he going from the pool for a world championship, then over to Mattamy or somewhere like that for a curling event? And it's like, where is he now? What's he doing today? And he never seems to stand still.
No. Agreed. Josh, I took your answer originally out of your mouth, and you took mine out of for me. But
well,
I
good.
will. That's fine. I will elaborate though on mine because I have a real-time example of what you're talking about, and he said it the last time we had him on. You know, he said he regretted not going to the bocce venue because Allison and Julian were doing their thing and just time didn't happen. But you know who wears the guilt the most about that? Is Devin. And that's where I would also say to the people at CBC, if anyone's listening, I would say don't put him in that, like don't do that to Devin where he thinks I gotta be here because I want to have a conversation with Allison, Julian, Marco, whoever it is, and then he has to feel guilty about it for days and days later. Because, and again, that's not a Devin fault, Claire. That's a scheduling of like, we know Devin's the best and we're going to show you that Devin's the best because he's going to be at 6 events in, 4 days. And it's like, man, you can't do that to the poor guy.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. I don't really know how to elaborate on that because that's exactly right. Is sometimes it does seem maybe some broadcasters get kind of pulled in way too many directions instead of really letting them zone in on one or two things and perfecting those.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I understand budgets are tight and I understand you can only afford to do so much, but you have to send more than one reporter to a Paralympics, for goodness sake. Like you have to have more people on the ground if you're going to do it justice. And maybe you in the corporate office don't care as much and you're worried about how much budget you've got. But on the ground, the people that are there and are doing it and want to go to these things, they care about the coverage they're giving.
Also, the more travel you make somebody do, the more risk you put them in by, if you're taking a cab, a car, or whatever, things can happen in those scenarios. And so that can be sort of tough too. Josh, did I cut you off?
No, you're good.
Okay, no. Okay.
I think it begs the question also of, is there a monopoly happening in who gets to cover and actually broadcast big events like the Olympics and Paralympics? Could this be a answer of, do we see more Sportsnet, TSN, CTV, local broadcasting? Do we see more opportunity for everyone having more pieces of the pie instead of only a couple?
We saw it for Vancouver. I mean, yeah. But that, I mean, everyone's going to say, yeah, but that was Vancouver. Yeah. And it was very successful.
Right.
I think but I'm sure I've heard backstage stories, if you will, that there was friction between everybody because you're so used to fighting against each other for everything that then to all kumbaya and be one family was a foreign concept to them all. So
I will not publicly elaborate, but I have been in a scenario where that exact thing happened. You had 3 different production companies trying to work on one production, and every piece of situation there thought that their idea was good, and we were fighting, and people lost their gigs with that. There was a group of us that were not asked back to do the gig, and they're rolling their own thing. And are they allowed to do that? Yeah, but I think to your point, the more cooks you have in the kitchen, like you did for Vancouver, it gets a bit tough. Did it pull off well? Did Brian Williams do primetime very well? Did we all say kumbaya at the end of it? Sure we did. But I bet you if we sat down and asked Devin, how was 2010 comparative to any other, he'd say, oh boy, I'm sure that's what it would be. And I wasn't there. but I can surmise, knowing personal experience, when you get more people involved, it just becomes a bit of a challenge on it. I looking to get Devin on in the not too distant future, because I've got some questions about stuff that's going on in the Paralympic world, and only person that really can answer some of them is Devin. So I'm sending out my people to reach out and poke Devin, and we'll see. But hopefully stay tuned. You might get a summer edition of Devin Heroux at some point in the not too distant future. Now, because Josh and Jeremie did such a wonderful job in their interview was about a half an hour, and that's primarily because Jeremie's a podcast host and really knows how to talk well and does that a good job. So that's why we're a little short on our time for today's episode and the chatting. But I would be remiss if I didn't get to the mainstream sports topics that we have on the board today. And I'm going to do this in particular order because I want to get somewhere to end the show. So, conference final. We have Vegas and Colorado. The third game, Colorado gets out to a 3-0 lead, and then Vegas storms back and scores 5 unanswered goals, and they win the series to take a stranglehold on this series. Having said that, going into game 3, there was stats floating around that it's only happened once when a team loses the first 2 games at home, that they came back and win. Now it's looking pretty grim. What do you guys make of this series? And then I'll touch on the other elephant in the room with that series as well. But just as a whole, what do you make of the series? Let's start with Josh on this one.
Well, I think the elephant's going to get released early because I'm going to call this series the Mitch Marner coming out party. I mean, this guy is leading the playoffs in goals, as I understand it. I haven't looked at the numbers today, but I'm fairly certain that that's the case. And good for him. Like, this is just proof that when you give a guy a chance to be himself, he can thrive. I think he was pigeonholed here into perhaps a role that didn't suit him as well. And I don't think, even though he was very successful, I don't think he was as successful as he could have been here. And I will even throw out the Molotov cocktail, if you will, and say that he should have been the one we kept, as opposed to some of these others.
Oof. Yeah.
Which is going to hurt a lot of Leaf fans, and I'm sorry about that. But when he was signed and traded, I'm almost certain that I said to everyone, you watch. You've made your decision, and now he's going to go win somewhere else. And that's exactly what he's doing.
That has been a tale as old as time as Maple Leaf fans, that we see a player get traded away and fairly quickly they have a cup over their head skating around. So yes, Mitch Marner is showing up huge. I think I watched that comeback game, and it's daunting how impactful and how much the Colorado Avalanche lean on Nathan MacKinnon. He got injured in this game and they kind of fell apart. And it's Vegas is having a great year. Marner, like you said, is able to do what he wants and play freely. He's making plays that are going to be probably top 10, top 15 all time. And I am really looking forward to what the Stanley Cup final matchup will be, because honestly, I think a Vegas-Montreal matchup would be very exciting to watch.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put this as succinctly as I can with Mitch Marner. He was eligible to leave as of July the 1st. He was lucky to be granted a sign and trade situation so that the Leafs were not left holding the bag. Some would still argue that they kind of were still left holding the bag. I misspoke a couple of weeks ago, as Josh so nicely pointed out, that it was a sign and trade. It just felt like it was free agency because it was July 1st, and that's just what happens. If Mitch Marner wins the Stanley Cup, which is entirely possible, and he also could win the Conn Smythe, like this could be a double whammy. First year done, gone by. Here's my Stanley Cup. Here's my Conn Smythe. Have a good day. Mitch Marner deserves all the success that Mitch Marner is getting. He exercised the right to move on, and that's what he did. And Leaf fans, you can bitch and moan about, but he didn't play this way in Toronto, and look at him now. Josh warned you. Josh told you this, is that be prepared to see somebody else be successful. And guess what? We now have to stomach the fact that in 3 weeks, we could be talking about Mitch Marner hoisting a Stanley Cup, which is just the reality of sports. I actually wish nothing but the best for Mitch Marner. I did see something today, though, that puzzled me, in that he was asking the difference between his success now with this team and what he has had in the past. And they might as well have said what he has had with the Leafs, because he hasn't played anywhere else but Vegas and Toronto, but they tried to put it diplomatically. And his basic response was, we're a team, we're cohesive, we're not yelling at each other, we're not getting angry. And I kind of raised an eyebrow and I went, the only one I believe doing the yelling was you, sir. And and could you argue that, pressure, all that? But I just found it sort of fascinating that he articulated that it's different because the environment's different. Nobody's yelling when he's the one that did the yelling. Does anybody want to comment on that, or shall we move on?
He might have been referring to the locker room. I feel like over those last few years with the Leafs, that it had to be a frustrating environment. And then I think we always have to talk about the weight that the just immense level of media that they have to deal with in Toronto every single day. So I think that, on the bench and during games, we saw him being one of the louder ones and in everyone's face. But I absolutely believe that was happening from all corners of the locker room. It had to be frustrating.
Agreed. So just watch Mitch Marner, however that ends up being, and it just is what it's going to be.
Or Montreal goes for 2 with a PWHL championship and an NHL championship in the same year.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about that in a second, because I want to know what's worse. Is it Mitch Marner winning the Stanley Cup or Montreal Canadiens winning the Stanley Cup? But we'll get there. We got to talk about Montreal 1-1. They dominated game 1, and then it was like Carolina was on like a 13-day break. Oh, wait, they were. And they looked like it. Game 1. They looked like they were on a break, and Mr. Brindamore was like, I don't know what I'm watching, but my team didn't handle that speed very well. What do you make of this series? 1-1. Do we anticipate it going 6 or 7? What do you guys make? Start with Josh on this one.
I can see it go 7, just because, until game 1, you hadn't seen Carolina lose a game. And you can say all you want about rest, but I think we saw the rust that took place. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Agreed. And now that that's happened, I think Carolina's going to be awake and ready to go. I just don't know how you stop Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Demidov. Jakub Dobiš looks like he's playing out of his mind right now. That's incredible to watch. And he says, like, I'm just a goalie. I'm just here doing my thing. He's so calm, so cool that I don't even remember who their backup goalie is. Like, if they have to take Dobiš out of the net, I don't know what's going to happen. But I can't see him letting go of it. And so when you've got a hot goaltender and you've got multiple guys who can score, that's a recipe for a win, in my opinion. I do think Montreal's going to take it, but I think it's going to take 7 games.
I agree with Josh, is that we're looking at two teams that do have two different styles of play. With Montreal, they have a handful of players that are highly skilled and can score. And Carolina plays with a faster style of play. That game 2 really showed that. I think I said right at the beginning of the second period that if Montreal's going to lose this game, it's going to be because of turnovers and that they can't handle the speed of which Carolina was playing that game. And that's what happened. The game was lost on turnovers and just not being able to stay at that pace for 3 periods. So Montreal's going to have to adapt to that, but I think they can. This is not going to be a short series at all.
So I'm going to lump this sort of 2-in-1 so that we don't have a 2-hour podcast by the time it's all said and done. Claire, do you get on the bandwagon of, hey, Montreal Canadiens are the only Canadian team left. We got to jump on the bandwagon and ride the way through? And what's worse, Montreal winning the Stanley Cup or Mitch Marner winning the Stanley Cup? You go first, and then Josh, same 2 questions to you, and then I'll answer it.
Well, I remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this, and Cam reamed me out pretty hard for just wanting the cup back in Canada. I'm going to stand on that comment and say that I just want the cup back in Canada, and I would love for that to happen. And also, Mitch Marner, he's a Canadian kid. We watched his career in London. Like, he, at some point, whether it's right now or later, that kid deserves a cup. So I think I'm happy either way.
Fair enough.
Yep. I agree with you. And I will say, I think Cameron must have had a rough couple of weeks then, because he heard me say that I used to be a Canadiens fan at one time in my life. So I think he nearly fell off his chair. Yeah, I would like to see the cup back in Canada. However, I know I have family who would like to see Mitch Marner win a cup because they want to see him stick it to the Leafs. And I'm not happy or unhappy with either of those results. I would love the cup to come back to Canada just to stick it to Gary Bettman. But if Mitch Marner wants to win the Stanley Cup and parade it down Front Street or University Avenue, go for it.
I'm going to shout out my, as I give you my response, I'm going to shout out my chiropractor who works in Brampton. I will even shout out where they are, what they do, all that jazz. But they're on Wexford Road, Justine Blaney Wellness Center. And I went in there last week, and we always talk a bit of sports. And I asked my chiropractor the same question. And he started saying to me, do you think for a minute that if the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I stopped him and I said, the answer to your question is absolutely not. Because what he was going to say was, if the Toronto Maple Leafs were the last Canadian team, are the Montreal L'Habitant cheering for the Maple Leafs? The answer is unequivocally no. And I said 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, I said, I want to see the cup, rah, rah. Then I really thought about what my doctor said, and I went, he's got a point. I don't know that Montreal is jumping on the Maple Leafs bandwagon. And to be honest with you, I don't know that many franchises are jumping on the Maple Leafs bandwagon anyway. It doesn't matter what they are, they're just not. Do I have to be thrilled and jump on the bandwagon? No. Am I enjoying watching what Montreal is doing? Am I a bit jealous of what Montreal is doing? Yes, 100%, because we were told that this is what Toronto was supposed to be with our big four, and we see what that happened. And they're drafting, developing, etc., so on and so forth. So do I have to be happy for either situation? No, but I have to respect the game, and that's what I'm doing. I'm respecting the game on both sides of this. I'm respecting the fact that if Marner wins a Stanley Cup and a Conn Smythe, then we tip our caps and we move on and we're happy and whatever. Games are going to continue, and I'm going to turn each game on and watch it. And I would have done it as a fan or a podcast host. Doesn't matter. I'm not forced to do this either way, but I'm watching it, and I have to respect the game of both Mitch Marner and the Montreal Canadiens, because you know what? There's pieces of this team that I like, and Josh articulated all of the pieces that I like. I also like Martin St. Louis. The guy is the most calm press conference deliver person that I've ever met. Like, he literally stands there and goes, "Yeah, that's my team. They play the right way," and it's all hockey cliche and yada. It's all that stuff, but it's enjoyable to watch. And you know what? He's got his horses going right in line with how it is. You cannot hate the situation there.
You read my mind, Brock. I was absolutely going to chime in and give Martin St. Louis his flowers, because he is creating a culture that people want to be there and people want to show up for him, and because he's showing up for them. And this has a big part to do with the coach in that locker room.
My first question to John Chayka, and then I'm probably going to go out the door pretty quickly here, is can you spell the word culture? Because we haven't had culture here in a long time. And step one is, can you spell it? Can I spell it? No. But am I paid to spell it? Nope. And so if you're going to tell me that this is a culture thing and we've got to get a better culture, then you better put it on the whiteboard and you better spell it correctly. And I want to see it in 2, 3, 4 years that we have a better culture, because you ran out Craig Berube pretty quick and you said that, no disrespect to him, he's a Stanley Cup winning, but put the word culture on the board and let's see. That's the end of our show for this week. I'd like to thank Josh Watson, Claire Buchanan. I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Follow. Stay tuned for next week, because you just never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Be safe, be well.